Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we set sail into one of the most haunting and extraordinary stories of the Second World War, a story of the USS Indianapolis. It begins with secrecy and speed, with a powerful warship cutting across the Pacific on a mission so important that only a handful of men knew what they carried. It moves through sudden catastrophe in the dark of night and into days beneath an open sky where courage was tested beyond anything training could prepare them for. This is a story of duty, of endurance, of human error and human resilience. It is about decisions made in war rooms and consequences felt in the vastness of the ocean. It is about survival against staggering odds and about how memory and justice can take decades to find their way home. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, allow your breathing to slow. Let your shoulders soften and your thoughts drift with the tide. We will move across wide waters and through moments that shaped history at a pace that lets your mind wander and settle. Let's begin. The USS Indianapolis was a United States Navy heavy cruiser that served in World War II, fighting across the vast Pacific Ocean against Japan. She carried powerful naval guns, escorted aircraft carriers, and helped lead major operations during some of the war's most intense battles. In July 1945, she was given a secret mission to deliver key components and enriched uranium for the atomic bomb that would soon be dropped on Hiroshima. The delivery was completed successfully, but on her return voyage, she was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine and sank in just minutes. What followed was one of the most harrowing survival stories in naval history and one of the most tragic losses at sea. The secret delivery that she made helped end the war, but then the ship vanished. In the final weeks of the Pacific War, this cruiser was trusted with a cargo so sensitive that paperwork was locked down and conversation was discouraged. The ship sprinted from the American West Coast to a remote airbase on Tinian, running a timetable that left little room for mishap. The containers were small enough to seem ordinary, yet they belonged to the most consequential weapon project of the century. Once the crates were handed over, the mission did not come with a victory parade or a public announcement. The ship simply turned back into the open ocean and headed toward the Philippines, alone and largely unheard from. That sudden shift from world-changing purpose to ordinary transit is part of what makes the story so unsettling. A vessel can carry history in its holds, then disappear into night. The mission carried atomic bomb components to Tinian under strict secrecy. The cargo carried to Tinian was connected to a weapon that would change global politics and human fear forever. It was not a single device sitting in a crate. It was the essential material and hardware that would allow rapid assembly at a forward base, far from prying eyes. Security was layered, with sealed containers, limited knowledge, and a clear sense that the less said, the safer everyone remained. The ship's speed mattered because the timetable of the wider project was tight, and every day of delay carried strategic risk. On Tinian, the cargo moved into a world of guarded hangars, restricted zones, and technicians working behind fences. Many sailors never learned what their ship had delivered, which adds a strange innocence to the achievement. They had helped steer history without being told what history was. The voyage became a hidden hinge between laboratory theory and wartime reality. A Japanese submarine hit her twice, just after midnight. Far below the surface, a hunter waited with patience that felt almost inhuman. The submarine's commander watched for the angle, the speed, and the moment when a target filled the periscope in a clean, confident line. The sea was dark, yet the surface ship could still be found by silhouette and by routine, because even a powerful cruiser must move along a path. When the decision came, it came fast. 2 torpedoes were launched with calculation, not rage. The impacts were separated by seconds, yet they changed the fate of 1,000 lives. One strike ripped into the front of the ship. Another tore into critical spaces that kept her afloat and functional. From the submarine's perspective, the scene would have been brief, a flash and a shudder in the water. From the ship's perspective, it was chaos without warning. Midnight at sea can feel calm, until it suddenly is not. She sank in about 12 minutes, leaving hundreds suddenly adrift. The attack did not unfold like a long battle. It was a violent interruption. Torpedoes struck, and the ship's shape changed in an instant, with steel torn open and seawater rushing into spaces meant to stay dry. Power failed quickly, which stole away light, pumps, and clear communication. Men below decks were cut off by flooding and by doors that could not be opened against pressure. On deck, the tilt grew steeper by the minute, which turned ladders into cliffs and the rail into a sliding edge. Orders were shouted into smoke and darkness, yet time kept collapsing. Few rafts made it free. Many life jackets were worn in haste, sometimes without proper adjustment. Then the sea took the ship in a single, final motion, and the survivors found themselves scattered across a slick of oil and debris, with no ship left to anchor their world. Rescue arrived by chance, after days of silence and missed alarms. A war at sea depends on schedules, signals, and people noticing when something breaks. In this case, several weak links failed at once. The ship was expected at a destination, but the system that should have tracked her progress did not raise an immediate, undeniable alarm. Messages that might have prompted a search were delayed, doubted, or lost in wartime noise. Radio silence also meant there was no steady trail of check-ins that could narrow the mystery. So the ocean kept it secret, while men floated beyond the horizon of every chart. What finally changed the story was not a perfect protocol. It was an accident of observation. A routine flight crossed the right patch of water and noticed something that did not belong. The difference between disappearance and rescue became a single set of eyes, looking down at the sea at exactly the right moment. Only 316 men survived from nearly 1,200 aboard. The most painful number in this story is not the size of the ship or the distance she sailed. It is the size of the group that made it home. When the cruiser went down, hundreds entered the water at once, but survival was not decided in a single moment. It unfolded in phases. Some men were wounded and could not keep their heads up. Others had life jackets that were damaged or poorly secured, and hours later, the ocean punished that small mistake. Groups formed around rafts and floating nets. Then drift and exhaustion pulled those clusters apart. The mind also became an enemy, because thirst and sun can bend judgment until a person makes choices they would never make on land. By the time help finally arrived, the sea had sorted the crew with cruel efficiency. The final count became a symbol of how quickly order can dissolve into chance. Survivors faced thirst, exposure, and shark attacks in open ocean. Once the ship was gone, the environment became the main antagonist. The sun could feel merciless because it baked skin already coated with fuel oil and salt. The night brought a different kind of strain, with shivering, cramps, and the fear of what moved unseen beneath the surface. Fresh water was the obsession. Salt water tempted men who were desperate, then punished them with nausea, confusion, and worsening dehydration. Some tried to collect rain in scraps of fabric. Others sucked on straps and cork, hoping for any hint of moisture. Weakness made it harder to keep a life jacket positioned correctly, which turned simple floating into constant work. Then there were the sharks. They circled the scattered groups, drawn by movement and blood, and their presence changed the sound of the water itself. The ocean became crowded, even though it looked empty in every direction. Her captain was court-martialed, then cleared decades after his death. In the aftermath, grief demanded an explanation, and institutions often answer grief with a name. Captain Charles McVay survived the sinking, which meant he also survived into the machinery of blame. The trial focused on a tactical choice, and it treated that choice as if it existed in a clean textbook world rather than a wartime ocean filled with uncertainty. Even the Japanese submarine commander testified, and his words suggested that the outcome might not have changed. Still, the conviction stood, and the weight of it followed McVay for years. Families wrote letters. Some were compassionate. Others were sharp enough to reopen wounds. Decades later, survivors, historians, and lawmakers pushed the record toward a fuller picture. A congressional resolution acknowledged the injustice and helped restore honor where it had been stripped away. The long delay is part of the tragedy, because vindication arrived after the man could no longer feel it. The wreck was found in the deep, more than 70 years later. For decades, the ship rested in darkness, beyond diving limits and beyond ordinary search. The Pacific is vast, and even a known route can become a wide corridor of uncertainty when currents and wartime records are imperfect. The breakthrough came with modern deep-sea technology, plus careful study of logs and positions that had been overlooked or misread. A search vessel mapped the seafloor with sonar, then sent remotely operated vehicles down into crushing pressure and cold. When the image finally appeared, it was both discovery and memorial. The hull lay like a quiet silhouette, with details preserved by depth and by the slow pace of decay in deep water. The bow was separated, which showed how violently the ship had been broken. Seeing the wreck did not change the past, yet it gave families and historians a physical place to point to, and a reminder that the ocean keeps what it takes. Prior to the attack, sailors were on watch for submarines, but night at sea was never quiet, even when it seemed calm. Darkness changed everything. Sounds carried differently, and the mind filled gaps with imagined threats. On watch, sailors listened to the ocean's slap against steel, to the hum of engines, to the occasional clank of equipment settling as the ship rolled. Outwardly, it could look peaceful, with a black horizon and stars overhead, yet every routine had a wartime edge. Lights were controlled to avoid silhouette. Cigarettes were hidden. Voices were kept low. A single careless glow could announce a ship's position to an enemy who was already waiting. The crew also had to navigate fatigue. Watches rotated, sleep came in fragments, and an alarm could rip you out of a dream into action in seconds. Even in calm seas, the ship lived with motion, vibration, and the constant awareness that danger preferred the dark. In that way, night became its own environment, as real as any storm. It taught sailors to respect what they could not see, and to stay ready when calm was only a mask. Lookouts searched darkness for periscopes, wakes, and sudden silhouettes. A lookout's job sounds simple until you picture what they were asked to do. Stand on a moving platform, often in wind and spray, and find a threat that might only reveal itself as a faint line on the water. A periscope could be a small glint that vanishes. A torpedo wake could look like a harmless ripple until it is too late. A distant ship might appear as a shadow, then disappear behind a swell. Lookouts trained their eyes to notice the wrong shape in a world of waves, and they trained their minds to report clearly under pressure. That clarity mattered because the bridge needed seconds, not stories. When a lookout called a contact, the ship might turn hard, change speed, or order guns ready, all based on that one human observation. It could also be false, because the sea plays tricks with light and foam. Yet the job was still essential. In an age before perfect sensors, the first warning often came from a sailor's eyes, scanning the dark until they ached. In late March 1945, a kamikaze hit her near Okinawa. The Pacific War had reached its most desperate phase, and Okinawa turned the sea into an arena of sudden, one-way attacks. A plane came in low and fast, aimed not at pride or symbolism, but at the practical goal of disabling a fighting ship in a single strike. When it hit, the impact was not just fire and noise. It was twisted metal, flying fragments, and an instant change in the ship's routine. Men who had been tracking the sky were suddenly hauling hoses, carrying the wounded, and sealing off dangerous spaces before flames could spread. The shock also tested discipline, because panic can travel faster than smoke. Surviving a hit like that meant returning to stations even while the ship was hurt, and it meant trusting training when instinct wanted to run. The damage became a harsh preview of what could happen without warning, and it left marks that repairs could hide, but memory could not. The blast killed sailors and tore into her hull, yet she stayed afloat. A hit from above can feel unfair, because there is no duel, only impact. The ship absorbed the blow through layers of structure, and each layer passed violence inward like a slammed door. Fires began where fuel and heat met, while debris made familiar passageways feel unfamiliar. Damage control teams worked in conditions that were loud, hot, and confusing, with orders shouted over alarms and with visibility ruined by smoke. Keeping a ship afloat is a chain of small victories. A valve that gets closed in time. A flooded space that gets isolated. A fire that gets contained before it finds ammunition. Medical stations also became islands of urgency, where corpsmen treated burns, shrapnel wounds, and shock, while the ship still moved through a combat zone. The survival of the hull was not luck alone. It was the ship's internal resilience and the crew's refusal to let one strike decide the ending. In a war of sudden catastrophes, staying afloat was a form of defiance. She limped back for repairs, crossing the Pacific under her own power. After an attack, the ocean does not pause to let you recover. The ship still had to travel, and every mile home was a reminder that damage follows you like a shadow. A wounded warship can feel slower even when engines are turning, because the crew hears every unfamiliar vibration and watches every gauge with extra suspicion. Temporary fixes must hold under strain, and the sea tests them with rolling motion and constant pressure. Routine becomes more intense. Lookouts remain alert. Engineers listen for changes. Damage control stays ready in case a repaired seam fails. There is also an emotional weight to a journey like this, because the crew carries fresh grief while still doing their jobs. Home is not comfort yet. It is a dock, a crane, and a schedule. Still, making that crossing under her own power mattered. It proved the ship was not finished, and it gave the crew a chance to bring their own battered home back to a place where it could be rebuilt. At Mare Island, workers rebuilt her wounds in a race with time. A naval shipyard during wartime is a place where clocks feel louder. Mare Island was filled with noise, sparks, and the steady rhythm of heavy industry, all aimed at returning damaged ships to the fight as quickly as possible. Repairs were not cosmetic. Workers cut away bent steel, welded new sections, replaced ruined equipment, and inspected systems that might have been weakened by shock. It was a kind of surgery, performed on a giant patient that had to be seaworthy when the work was done. The crew watched, helped where they could, and learned what their ship looked like when it was opened up. Compartments that were normally sealed and private became exposed, revealing how tightly everything was packed inside. The pressure came from the war's pace. Every ship in the yard represented a missing piece at the front. This repair period also created a strange calm, because danger was temporarily replaced by the urgency of rebuilding, and by the hope that the ship's story was still moving forward. She returned to service in mid-July, ready for a final task. Coming back to operational status is not just paperwork. It is the moment the ship is declared fit to carry lives into risk again. By mid-July, the Pacific War was nearing its end, yet it remained lethal and unpredictable, and the Navy still needed ships moving with purpose. The crew faced a psychological shift. After repairs, a ship can feel both familiar and new, with updated equipment, fresh paint, and altered spaces that remind you of what happened before. Drills sharpened the edges again. Gunnery checks, communications tests, and underway routines returned, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. Then came the assignment that would define everything. Not a long campaign with many battles, but a short mission wrapped in secrecy and urgency. The ship did not know it was stepping onto the last page of its own history. It simply received orders, prepared, and sailed. That ordinary process makes the ending more haunting because the final task began like any other duty day. The last voyage began with sealed orders and guarded cargo. Some missions announced themselves with big formations and visible importance. This one arrived in quiet. Orders were sealed. The cargo was handled with extra care. Conversations narrowed, because the fastest way to protect a secret is to limit who even knows there is one. The ship became part courier, part fortress, carrying materials tied to the most guarded scientific project of the war. To many sailors, the crates were only crates. To a few, they were a responsibility heavy enough to change how they slept. Secrecy also shapes a crew's mood because it adds tension without explanation. You can feel urgency without being told why. You can sense that mistakes are unacceptable without hearing the full reason. The ship's speed became the shield, and efficiency became the language spoken across decks. This was not a voyage meant to be remembered publicly. It was meant to be completed, quietly, quickly, and without leaving a trail. That hidden nature makes the story feel like a locked room mystery, except the room is an ocean. She left San Francisco fast, running hard across open water. The Pacific is so large that even a powerful ship can feel small inside it. Leaving San Francisco, the cruiser pushed into that immensity with the kind of sustained pace that turns distance into a test of machinery and stamina. High-speed running demands fuel management, constant engine attention, and a crew that can keep routine tasks steady while the ship vibrates with effort. It also changes the feeling of time. Days become a sequence of watches, meals, and brief sleep, marked by the steady pull of forward motion. Out on open water, the horizon is a circle, and the weather has its own personality, yet the mission's timetable keeps pulling the ship onward. This crossing was not done for comfort. It was done for urgency. The ship was proving what a cruiser could do when asked to sprint across an ocean highway. That pace mattered because the destination was not just another port. It was a place at the center of a plan that would soon reshape the world, whether sailors understood it or not. The ship delivered the uranium cargo to Tinian in record time. Tinian was not a glamorous name to most Americans, yet it had become one of the most important air bases on Earth. Delivering cargo there quickly meant beating the usual friction of war. Weather, mechanical issues, routing changes, and the simple chaos of a global conflict could slow almost anything. This run did not slow. The ship arrived, the cargo transferred, and the mission's most sensitive part moved from sea to land without fanfare. It is chilling to think about how ordinary that transfer may have looked. Crates moved by careful hands. Checklists followed. Guards watching. In the background, crews elsewhere were preparing an operation that would shock the planet. What makes this delivery so gripping is the contrast between scale and appearance. A few containers, moved efficiently, carried consequences that reached far beyond any map of the Pacific. The ship was doing its job, like thousands of ships had done before. Yet this job was tied to a new kind of power, one that would echo into the rest of the century. Many aboard never learned what the crates truly meant. War creates strange partitions of knowledge. A sailor can risk his life for a mission while being told almost nothing about its purpose. On this voyage, that partition was intentional, because secrecy was part of the weapon. Some then knew they were carrying something important. Few understood the full meaning. For many, the crates were only another piece of wartime cargo, handled with extra rules that did not come with explanations. That ignorance was not failure. It was policy. Compartmentalization reduces the chances of leaks, and it protects missions even if a ship is lost. There is also a human poignancy in it. People can become crucial links in history without being allowed to see the chain. Later, when the world learned what had been delivered to Tinian, some survivors and families would look back and realize the ship had touched the edge of an epical moment. That delayed understanding adds weight to every ordinary detail of the voyage. It turns routine labor into participation in a turning point, whether the crew wanted that burden or not. After unloading, she sailed to Guam, then turned toward the Philippines. The moment the cargo was gone, the ship's role shifted again. She moved to Guam, a hub of operations where ships refueled, received instructions, and slid in and out like pieces on a vast board. Then she set her course toward the Philippines, aiming for Leyte, a destination that should have meant more duty, more routine, and perhaps the beginning of the wars. Closing chapter. This leg of the journey is the quiet corridor where tragedy often hides. The mission's secret heart had already been completed, so the voyage could feel like a return to normal naval life. Yet the sea does not care what you have accomplished. It only offers distance and risk. The ship now traveled through waters where enemy submarines still prowled, and where a single unseen decision could erase an entire crew's future. That is part of what makes the story feel so cruel. The most historically famous part of the mission ended safely on a sunny island airfield. The disaster came afterward, during the passage that should have been ordinary. She traveled without escort, despite known submarine threats. The decision to sail alone can sound reckless, yet wartime oceans were full of trade-offs. Escort ships were limited, and commanders had to decide where protection mattered most on any given day. A fast cruiser also carried a reputation for self-reliance, and speed was often treated like armor. There was also a belief that a ship could reduce risk through maneuvering and watchfulness, especially if it did not linger in predictable patterns. Still, submarines thrived on opportunity, and opportunity increases when a target has no nearby help. An escort might spot a periscope, force a submarine down, or at least attack after a strike. Alone, the cruiser had no immediate partner to hunt the attacker or to pull survivors aboard. The lonely logic of wartime scheduling placed a priceless crew in a gap between priorities. The ocean did the rest, because it always does. Her route crossed lonely waters, far from immediate help. In the Philippine Sea, distance is not measured only in miles. It is measured in response time. A ship can be within the same theater and still be functionally isolated, because the nearest friendly vessel may be hours away at best and days away at worst. Those wide spaces shaped the psychology of everyone aboard. The horizon looked empty, which could feel like safety, yet it also meant there were fewer witnesses and fewer rescuers. Navigation relied on dead reckoning, star sights, and careful plotting, with little room for casual error. Weather could also erase clues. A squall can hide smoke, scatter debris, and blur the line between a normal night and a disaster. When something went wrong on this route, there was no nearby net of ships to notice, investigate, and respond. The cruiser was moving through an ocean that felt like a corridor, and corridors can become traps when doors close behind you. She maintained radio silence, protecting the secret mission's trail. Radio silence is a kind of invisibility, and invisibility has a price. It protects a ship from being located by intercepted signals, and it helps keep sensitive missions from being pieced together by enemy listeners. It also means the ship stops leaving small footprints in the Navy's communication system. Routine check-ins vanish. Casual confirmations vanish. Even minor problems stay aboard, because the instinct to report them is overridden by the need to stay quiet. For the crew, this rule creates a strange atmosphere. The ocean feels more private, yet also more cut off. If a ship is delayed by weather or mechanical issues, the delay can become invisible until someone notices the absence. In this story, silence served the mission's secrecy, yet it also deepened the later mystery. When the ship failed to arrive, there were fewer breadcrumbs to follow, and fewer early chances to ask the simplest life-saving question: where are you? Several warnings about submarines never reached her bridge in time. Modern people expect information to move instantly, yet wartime communication was a chain of human actions, and any link could bend or break. A warning might be received at one station and filed away. It might be judged outdated. It might be lost in a crowded stack of messages, because every command center was managing hundreds of signals. It might be delayed by shifts, fatigue, or simple assumption that someone else had already passed it on. In this case, the consequences were brutal. A single alert could have changed how the ship moved, how the lookouts focused, and how officers assessed risk through the night. Instead, the cruiser continued without the best possible picture of what hunted nearby. That is one of the most chilling aspects of the tragedy. The danger may have been known in pieces, yet those pieces did not assemble into action soon enough. The ocean does not forgive clerical pauses, and submarines do not wait for paperwork to catch up. The attacker was submarine I-58, hunting in darkness. A submarine in patrol mode is a creature of patience. It moves slowly, listens constantly, and uses the sea itself as camouflage. I-58 was part of Japan's effort to keep striking, even as the war turned against it, and a lone cruiser was the kind of target that could still bring a sense of payoff. On board the submarine, sailors lived in cramped compartments with air that grew stale, and they operated under strict quiet to avoid detection. Their primary weapon was not speed. It was surprise. They watched shipping lanes and likely routes, hoping for a silhouette or a radar trace that suggested a ship moving without a protective screen. Night favored them, because surface lookouts lose depth and detail in darkness, while the submarine's approach can remain hidden beneath the chop. When the moment arrived, the submarine was not improvising. It was executing a practiced hunt, with calculations, angles, and a calm that is unsettling to imagine. The strike was quick, yet the stalking was long. Commander Mochitsuha Hashimoto chose his moment, then fired a spread. In naval warfare, a firing decision is an act of both math and nerve. Hashimoto had to judge range, bearing, and speed, then decide that the solution was good enough to spend precious torpedoes. A spread increases the chance of hits, yet it also reveals a submarine's presence, and commits it to the outcome. The periscope view offers only a narrow slice of reality, and the sea can distort distance and timing. Even so, experienced commanders learn to trust patterns and to trust training, because hesitation can waste the one clean opportunity that appears. After the torpedoes left their tubes, there was a brief stretch of waiting that must have felt endless. The submarine could not celebrate early. It had to listen for impacts through the water, and it had to prepare to dive deeper in case escorts appeared. That is part of the grim imbalance of submarine warfare. A few decisions made in a steel cylinder can decide the fate of a ship full of people who never saw their attacker. The first hit wrecked the bow, ripping steel open like paper. A torpedo does not just punch a hole. It detonates beneath the surface and uses water pressure to drive force into the hull. At the bow, that can mean shattered frames, twisted deck plating, and compartments that flood before anyone fully understands what happened. The front of the ship also contains anchors, chain lockers, and forward magazines, so damage there can cascade into multiple systems at once. The crew would have felt a violent jolt, then the sickening realization that the ship's shape was no longer trustworthy. Water rushing in changes trim, which changes speed, which changes steering response. That new imbalance also makes escape harder for anyone forward, because passageways can tilt and ladders become slick. On deck, the sea can surge through broken areas with startling speed. This first strike was the opening of a wound that could not be neatly contained. It was a message delivered in 1 second. The ship is dying, and you must respond faster than fear. The second struck near vital spaces, flooding compartments fast. If the first strike damaged the ship's body, the second attacked its ability to function. Vital spaces are where a ship keeps its power, its pumps, and the systems that let it communicate and coordinate a response. Flooding there can erase the tools that damage control depends on. Lights go out. Motors fail. Water pressure drops. Even well-trained teams struggle when they cannot see, cannot move equipment, and cannot receive clear orders. The speed of flooding also steals time for sealing doors and setting boundaries. A watertight door that closes 1 minute late might never close at all, because pressure can make it impossible to move. Meanwhile, the ship's list grows, and that list turns every task into a physical fight. The second hit was not just additional damage. It was a multiplier, because it helped transform a dangerous situation into an unstoppable one. The crew was not defeated by lack of courage. They were defeated by a rapid collapse of the systems that make courage effective. Power failed, and communications collapsed as the ship listed. Electricity aboard a warship is more than comfort. It is the nervous system. It runs lights, radios, pumps, and the internal phone circuits that carry orders from the bridge to the crew. When power fails, coordination fractures into pockets of shouting and guesswork. In the sudden darkness, sailors have to navigate by memory and by touch, and even familiar routes can become confusing when the ship tilts and smoke moves through corridors. The list adds urgency because it signals that flooding is gaining ground. It also makes it harder to launch rafts, harder to move the wounded, and harder to reach the places where a fix might still be possible. Communication collapse is also emotional. People lose the sense that someone is in control and that loss can be as dangerous as fire. Even if distress messages are sent, they may be incomplete or they may not be heard clearly. In those minutes, the ship becomes a rapidly shrinking world. It is steel, water, and desperate human effort, with no guarantee that anyone outside will understand the crisis in time. Distress calls were sent, but confusion and doubt swallowed them. Some signals did go out, yet a message is only as strong as the system that believes it. In wartime, Commands received false alarms, garbled reports, and mistaken identifications, often in the same hour. That background noise can teach people to hesitate, and hesitation can become fatal. A distress call might be heard by one station and questioned by another. It might be treated as a possible enemy trick. It might be logged without urgency because the ship's route was secret, and not everyone understood where it should be. Even when a message is taken seriously, the next step matters. Someone must order a search, assign ships, and commit resources. In this case, uncertainty created delay, and delay created silence. The most haunting part is how ordinary that failure can sound. A missed handoff, a skeptical ear, a process that expects time, when people in the water do not have time. The ocean does not care what the radio room debated. It only keeps moving. The cruiser rolled and went down, leaving oil and debris behind. The last moments were a fast collapse of stability. As the list increased, the deck angle turned ordinary movement into sliding, and the sea began to claim spaces that had been air only minutes before. When the hull finally rolled, the ship's outline disappeared with shocking speed, as if the ocean had pulled a curtain. What remained on the surface was a new and terrible landscape. A broad slick of fuel spread outward and coated everything it touched. Splinters of wood, loose gear, and pieces of metal bobbed in the darkness, turning the water into a drifting field of fragments. The smell was sharp and heavy, and it clung to skin and clothing. In that floating wreckage, men tried to gather themselves into groups because isolation felt like another kind of sinking. The ocean was suddenly quiet, in the way a room becomes quiet after a door slams. The ship was gone, yet the consequences were just beginning. Many men died instantly, trapped below decks by flooding. Some sailors never reached the open air. When the torpedoes hit, compartments became cages as water surged through ruptured sections and pressure sealed off escape routes. A door that could be opened easily in training can become immovable when the sea is pushing from the other side. In the dark, people had to find ladders by memory, and smoke or steam could make each breath feel stolen. The ship's internal layout, with narrow passageways and sudden turns, was efficient for daily work, yet it could become disorienting in emergency. Flooding also moved faster than human decision. A man might choose one corridor, only to discover it ending in rising water. Another might be knocked down by the ship's tilt and never regain footing. This is the part of the tragedy that is hardest to picture, because it happened out of sight, below the waves, and it ended before rescue was even imaginable. The ocean did not only take the ship, it took time itself from those trapped inside. Others leapt into black water, lit by fire and flares. On deck, survival demanded an immediate choice: stay with a ship that was clearly dying, or enter the sea and trust a life jacket and luck. The water below looked like ink, and it was made more frightening by what floated on it. Fuel oil spread across the surface, and it could catch fire when sparks and flames met it. In that chaos, light came in harsh bursts. Flares arced up, then drifted down, briefly turning faces and waves into stark silhouettes. Firelight made the ship seem both closer and more unreal, as if it were a burning building sliding into a basement. Men jumped from different heights, some trying to clear debris, others hesitating until the last possible moment. Hitting the ocean at night can feel like striking a wall, and disorientation can be immediate. The instinct is to look back, yet looking back can steal precious seconds. In those seconds, the distance between you and the sinking hull becomes the difference between breathing and being pulled under. Few lifeboats were launched because the sinking was so rapid. Launching a lifeboat at sea is a practiced sequence, not a single action. Covers must come off. Davits must swing. Lines must be tended. The boat must be lowered evenly, and it must avoid smashing against the hull. All of that takes time and coordination, and the ship did not offer much of either. As the list grew, equipment that was designed to move smoothly could jam, and a boat that lowered on one side could swing and slam, injuring people before it ever reached the water. Some boats may have been destroyed by the ship's motion. Others may have been unreachable because the deck angle turned pathways into slides. In the darkness, shouted instructions competed with alarms and the roar of rushing water. Even when a boat was freed, getting people into it safely was another challenge, because panic makes crowds push, and pushing near a ship's edge is lethal. So the water filled with men in life jackets instead of men in boats. That single fact shaped everything that followed, because a boat is shelter, water storage, and a chance for organized survival. Without boats, survival became scattered and improvised. Survivors clung to rafts, nets, and floating wreckage. Once the ship vanished, the first priority became staying together. A floating net or a scrap of wood can feel like a small island when your legs are cramping and your arms are tired from treading water. Some rafts were small and crowded, and every new person meant less stability for everyone already on it. Men grabbed at lines, straps, and any surface that let them rest their bodies for a moment. The problem was that the ocean never stops moving. Debris drifts, currents tug, and a group that forms at 1 hour can be stretched and broken in the next. People tried to make simple rules, like keeping the strongest swimmers on the outside, or tying pieces together with whatever cord they could find. Hope traveled in short distances. If you could see another face, you could believe help might still come. If you drifted alone, the mind began to fill the empty horizon with fear. That is why clinging mattered. It was not only physical support. It was social gravity, holding strangers together in a place that wanted to separate them. Salt water burned lips and eyes, and made swallowing a cruel mistake. The ocean attacks you in quiet ways first. Salt stings the eyes until blinking becomes painful. It cracks lips, and it dries the tongue until speech feels thick. Every wave that splashes across the face adds another layer of irritation, and the body responds with thirst that becomes a single obsessive thought. That is the trap, because swallowing seawater feels like relief for a moment. Then the salt pulls more water out of your cells, and the thirst returns sharper. The stomach can revolt, and vomiting wastes the little fluid the body still has. Some men tried to keep their mouths closed and breathe through the nose, yet coughing and panic can force a swallow anyway. Others attempted to shield their faces with bits of fabric, but fabric quickly became soaked with brine. Even the simple act of licking your lips could reopen cracks and bleeding. It was a slow torture that made the human body feel poorly designed for the world it was floating in. In that setting, discipline was not a lofty virtue. It was the difference between lasting another hour and collapso. Dehydration came fast under a fierce sun and open sky. After the first night, the sun rose into a sky with nowhere to hide. There was no shade, no dry shelter, and no way to cool down except by letting water touch skin that was already irritated and coated with oil. The body loses fluid constantly in heat, even if a person is not moving much. Lips whiten. Speech becomes slurred. Muscles cramp, especially in legs that must keep kicking. The mind starts to narrow, focusing on water to the exclusion of everything else. Some men tried to conserve energy by holding still, yet floating still requires strength when waves roll and life jackets ride up. Others kept moving, hoping motion would keep them alert, yet motion also burns calories and fluid. The sun also causes burns, and burns increase fluid loss while adding pain that erodes willpower. In the day, the ocean can look deceptively welcoming, bright and sparkling. That beauty is part of the cruelty. It hides the fact that the human body is drying out in real time, with each hour less forgiving than the last. Dehydration does not arrive like a single event. It arrives like a tightening belt, steadily, until breathing itself feels like work. Saltwater poisoning caused delirium and deadly choices. When people drink seawater, the result is not only thirst. It can become a spiral of confusion. The body cannot process that level of salt without sacrificing its remaining water, and the brain begins to misfire. A person might speak to someone who is not there. He might believe he sees land where there is only cloud. He might become convinced that rescue is just beyond the next wave, and then swim away from the only group that could keep him afloat. Delirium can also look like courage. Someone may insist he feels fine, even as his eyes fail to focus and his decisions become erratic. Friends tried to restrain men who wanted to remove life jackets, because heat and discomfort can feel unbearable, and the mind looks for any way to escape it. Others argued about what was real, because hallucinations can be contagious when people are exhausted and scared. The tragedy is that these choices were not moral failures. They were symptoms of a body pushed beyond its limits. In that drifting world, the most dangerous current was sometimes inside the mind itself, pulling a person away from safety one irrational step at a time. Shark attacks struck most often at night, when panic spread. Night changed the water into an unknown space again. Vision shrank to what you could hear and feel. A splash nearby could be a man adjusting his life jacket, or it could be something else moving with intent. Sharks are not movie monsters, yet in open water with wounded and exhausted swimmers, they become a real and immediate hazard. Darkness can embolden them, and it can also magnify human fear. A sudden thrash might cause people to kick harder, which creates more vibration in the water, which can draw more attention. Panic spreads fast in a floating group because no one can step away from it. Men would try to stay still, then flinch at every ripple. Those on rafts listened for impacts against the underside, and those in the water tried to keep legs close because dangling limbs felt like invitations. Each attack was not only a physical loss, it was a psychological blow that made the ocean feel inhabited by danger. When you cannot see what is coming, imagination rushes in to fill the gap. That is why night was so hard. It was not only colder and darker, it turned every sound into a question with a terrible possible answer. Even daylight brought danger as bodies weakened and drifted apart. Morning did not mean safety. It only meant you could see how far you were from help. As the days passed, weakness turned small problems into fatal ones. A life jacket that rode up could choke someone whose neck muscles were too tired to adjust it. A cramped leg could seize at the wrong moment, and the struggle to recover could waste precious energy. Groups that had stayed together overnight could be pulled apart by currents, and once a person lost contact, he might never regain it. The sun also created a false sense of optimism, because visibility makes people believe they are being watched. In reality, the horizon can hold no ships at all. During the day, men could also see the toll on one another. Eyes reddened, skin blistered, and speech slowed. That awareness can either strengthen resolve or break it. Some men tried to encourage others with stories of home, while others grew silent and inward, conserving breath as if it were water. Drifting apart was the quiet killer, because separation removes shared support and shared vigilance. In that way, daylight carried its own kind of menace. It showed the truth clearly, and the truth was that time was running out. The Navy did not immediately mark her overdue arrival at late. In a perfect system, an expected arrival is treated like a heartbeat. If it is missing, alarms begin. Here, that simple safeguard failed. The ship was steaming toward a busy wartime destination, and the schedule was only one thread in a thick web of movements. Ports handled constant traffic, and paperwork could lag behind reality. The voyage also carried secrecy, which meant fewer routine check-ins to prompt a quick question. When the ship did not appear, the absence did not instantly become an emergency. It became a blank space waiting to be noticed. That delay is one of the most chilling parts of the story, because it shows how a disaster can deepen without any enemy action at all. Men were in the water, and time was already the main killer. On shore and at command posts, time was still being treated like it was available in abundance. Reports were filed and ignored in a system strained by war. Wartime administration can look sturdy from the outside, yet inside, it can be exhausted. Messages arrive in floods, and each one competes with dozens of other priorities. A report about a missing ship can be misrouted, set aside, or treated as incomplete because it lacks a confirmation someone expects. People also rely on habits. If a ship is usually on time, a delay can be assumed temporary. If a route is considered routine, it can be treated as low risk even when the ocean says otherwise. This is not villainy. It is human fallibility under strain. Yet the effect is brutal. An ignored report does not merely sit on a desk. It stretches the distance between survivors and rescue, and it turns an already terrible situation into something far worse. The tragedy is made sharper by how mundane the failure can feel. A form is processed. A note is logged. The sea keeps moving, and the men keep waiting. Some stations assume she had arrived because no one confirmed. Assumption is a quiet force in large organizations. When everyone expects something to be true, the absence of proof can feel like proof itself. A ship bound for a major base can slip into an imagined category of already handled, especially when the port is busy and records are updated by many hands. One station may believe another has confirmed the arrival. Another may believe the ship's silence is intentional. Meanwhile, the clock keeps advancing. In the water, survivors measured time by sun and darkness. On shore, time was measured by shifts, logs, and routine. That mismatch is heartbreaking. It shows how catastrophe can hide in plain sight, not because no one cared, but because everyone thought someone else had checked. The ocean does not provide receipts. It does not send reminders. It only provides consequences. When confirmation finally came, it came too late to save hundreds who might have lived if a single person had asked, out loud, for certainty. The ocean became a waiting room, with no rescue on the horizon. After the shock of sinking, the next horror was the slow realization of absence. No engines approached. No aircraft circled. The horizon stayed empty, hour after hour, like a door but never opened. Survivors had to manage both their bodies and their expectations. Hope can be energizing, yet it can also be exhausting when it is repeatedly disappointed. Some men tried to keep watch, scanning for a speck of smoke or a glint of metal. Others chose to conserve their sight and strength because staring into brightness can feel like burning. The sea itself offered nothing stable to hold on to. Waves separated people and then pushed them back together, as if playing with them. In that kind of waiting, every sound becomes significant. A splash might be a raft bumping debris. It might be something far worse, The mind swings between planning and resignation, and the swing is tiring. The waiting room had no walls, no chairs, and no schedule. It was time itself, floating. Survivors organized groups, hoping strength in numbers would help. In open water, a group is more than company. It is a strategy. Men tried to cluster around anything that floated because a cluster is easier to spot and harder to lose. The strongest swimmers often took roles without being asked. They steadied rafts, helped reposition life jackets, and kept people from drifting away in small currents. Others acted like human anchors, linking arms or holding onto lines so the group stayed together when waves rose. This organization also created moral pressure. When you are part of a group, you are less likely to give up quietly. Someone notices if you go still. Someone calls your name. There is a strange comfort in that, even when it hurts. Groups also tried to set simple expectations. No swimming off alone. No reckless choices. Save energy. It was leadership built from necessity, not rank. On a ship, orders come down the chain. In the water, the chain was gone. What remained was improvisation and the human instinct to build structure in chaos. Prayers, jokes, and songs appeared, even in terror. In extreme situations, people reach for whatever keeps the mind from breaking. Some men prayed out loud, not always with formal words, but with the simple act of speaking to something beyond the horizon. Others told jokes, because laughter can be a small rebellion against panic. Humor can also help people breathe, and breathing matters when fear tightens the chest. Psalms appeared too, sometimes as fragments of popular tunes, sometimes as hymns remembered from childhood. A song creates rhythm, and rhythm can steady a group that is drifting and shivering. These moments were not denial. They were survival tools. They kept people connected, and they gave the night a shape other than dread. They also revealed something tender about the human mind. Even when surrounded by danger, it looks for familiarity. It looks for words it already knows. When the sea offers no structure, people make their own, with voices carried across dark water. A few men carried small knives for cutting lines and hope. A pocket knife can feel insignificant on a cruiser, yet in the water, it can become a life-saving instrument. A blade could cut tangled lines that trapped a man against debris, or free a strap that was choking someone as the life jacket shifted. It could help trim a makeshift tether, or separate pieces of wreckage to make a raft sit flatter. A knife could also be a psychological anchor. Holding a tool suggests agency, and agency is precious when you are being moved by currents you cannot control. Of course, it could not fight the ocean, and it could not conjure rescue. Yet in a floating crisis, small advantages matter. A sailor with a knife could solve problems others could not, and that made him valuable to the group. It also created responsibility. Tools can become points of conflict when people are desperate. The men who used knives well had to combine practicality with restraint. In a world reduced to water and endurance, a tiny blade could be the difference between being trapped and being free. Some shared life jackets, even when their own strength failed. Sharing buoyancy sounds simple until you imagine what it costs. A life jacket is not only flotation. It is heat retention, energy conservation, and the promise that sleep will not become drowning. Giving part of that away means accepting greater risk for yourself. Yet in the water, people made that choice. Sometimes it was a direct exchange. One man supported another who was slipping under, holding him up through waves that slapped their faces. Sometimes it was a gradual act, like tightening a strap on a friend whose jacket was riding too high. Sometimes it was an agreement between strangers, taking turns resting on debris so the weakest could recover. These choices created tiny islands of humanity inside a disaster. They also show how a group can become a moral system. Not everyone could be saved, and everyone knew it. Still, men tried to keep each other alive for one more hour, and then one more after that. In a story often told for its horror, these moments deserve equal weight, because they reveal a stubborn dignity that the sea could not wash away. The ordeal lasted more than 4 days, across heat and storm. Endurance is rarely dramatic. It is repetitive, exhausting, and measured in small decisions. Over more than 4 days, the survivors faced a cycle that never offered real recovery. Days brought glare, burning skin, and the slow weakening of muscles. Nights brought cold, cramped limbs, and a fear that grew louder when you could not see. Weather added another layer. A sudden squall can be both mercy and menace. It can cool overheated bodies, yet it can also scatter a group and overturn fragile rafts. Waves can fill mouths with brine, and they can batter bruised ribs until breathing hurts. Time also changes the social landscape. Strong voices become hoarse. Confident men fall silent. The group thins. The sea does not announce when someone slips away. It simply continues. Holding on through that length of time required more than physical toughness. It required a kind of stubborn attention, returning again and again to the next breath, the next grip, the next sunrise, even when hope felt like a story told by someone else. When rain finally fell, some tried to drink from slick canvas. Rain is supposed to mean relief, yet in open water, it arrives with complications. The first drops can feel like rescue itself, cool on skin that has been baking for days. Then reality returns. How do you capture it? Some men used pieces of canvas, scraps of fabric, or the surfaces of rafts, trying to funnel water toward their mouths. The problem was that everything was contaminated. Fuel oil had spread across bodies and gear, and salt had soaked into every thread. Water that ran across those surfaces could carry bitterness and chemicals, even as it promised life. Still, desperation makes people attempt what logic warns against. A careful sip could soothe a throat and clear a foggy mind. A careless gulp could bring nausea and waste strength. Rain also changed the mood. It made the ocean louder, and it blurred the line between sky and water. For a moment, the men were surrounded by water they could not safely drink, falling from above and rising from below, and the irony was sharp enough to hurt. A patrol plane saw an oil slick during a routine search. The turning point began with something almost easy to miss. From the air, the Pacific can look like a single, endless surface, with sunlight shifting it into patterns that feel alive. Yet an oil slick has its own signature. It spreads with an unnatural sheen, and it gathers debris like a dark tide line. A patrol crew scanning the sea for submarines or weather changes suddenly saw a clue that did not belong to wind or wave. That sight was not a rescue in itself. It was a question asked at the right time. Why is the water stained here? Why does it look disturbed? The plane circled, and each pass sharpened the suspicion that this was not a harmless spill. In war, routine flights often end with routine reports. This one ended with an urgent pivot from ordinary duty to a discovery that would decide who lived and who did not. Lieutenant Junior Grade Wilbur Gwynn made the sighting that changed everything. Wilbur Gwynn was doing the job that rarely becomes legend. He was watching. He was scanning a wide emptiness for anything that broke the pattern. When he recognized the slick and the scattered signs below, he did not treat it as background. He treated it as evidence. That moment of recognition matters because it is the opposite of complacency. He could have assumed it was nothing, or he could have logged it without urgency. Instead, he acted like someone who understood what the ocean can hide. He reported what he saw, and he kept attention on the area long enough for the next steps to become possible. History often celebrates dramatic decisions made by commanders in war rooms. This was different. This was a decision made by observation, by professionalism, and by the willingness to believe your eyes when the situation seems unbelievable. One person in an aircraft, looking down at a smear of oil, became the hinge between silence and rescue. The first radio message said, "Many men in the water." There is a difference between a vague contact report and a sentence that forces action. The message that went out from the aircraft was simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. It did not describe a distant shadow or a possible submarine. It described people. That distinction changes everything, because it turns the sea from a battlefield into an emergency room. Those words also carried shock, because the idea of large numbers of survivors drifting in open ocean did not fit the expectations of a routine patrol. The message had to travel through radios, operators, and decision-makers, and it had to cut through the clutter of wartime traffic. Its power was clarity. Men in the water means time is already running. It means medical help will be needed, not just weapons. It means ships must be diverted and risks must be accepted. A single line of radio speech can move whole fleets, and in this case it did. A PBY Catalina raced in, guided by the report. The Catalina was built for long patrols, and it carried an aura of stubborn reach. It could stay out for hours, skim low over waves, and look for what surface ships might never find. After the report came in, that slow, searching mission turned into a sprint of urgency. Crews prepared quickly, because every minute meant more exhaustion, more exposure, and more loss. The flight itself would have felt tense, with pilots imagining what they might find, and with everyone knowing that the ocean can turn lethal, even after a rescue begins. As the Catalina approached, the first sight of survivors would have been both relief and horror. Relief, because they were real. Horror, because of how many there were, and how fragile they looked from above. The aircraft became a bridge between worlds. It brought eyes, communication, and hope into a place that had been ruled by emptiness. For the men below, the sound of engines overhead would have felt like the first proof that the world still contained help. Lieutenant Adrian Marks landed on the ocean against standing orders. Landing a seaplane in open ocean is not a casual choice. It risks the aircraft, the crew, and the ability to take off again. Standing orders existed for a reason, because rough water can break a plane like a toy. Adrian Marks looked down at exhausted men, some barely staying afloat, and he chose the human problem over the procedural rule. That choice is gripping because it was immediate and irreversible. Once the plane touched down, it committed to becoming part of the rescue, not just an observer. Swells can slam a hull. Spray can blind a pilot. A sudden wave can flip a craft or tear a float. Yet Marks put the Catalina onto the water anyway, and in doing so, he turned a patrol aircraft into a lifeline. It is one of those moments where courage looks practical. It is not a speech or a charge. It is a measured risk taken because the alternative is watching people die while you remained safely airborne. The seaplane picked up the most wounded, even in heavy swells. Once the Catalina was on the water, every movement became delicate. Survivors had to reach the aircraft without capsizing it or injuring themselves further, and the crew had to haul people aboard while waves rocked the plane like a bar, cradle that might snap. The choice of who to take first carried its own weight. The most wounded were also the most at risk of drowning, and their bodies could not fight the water much longer. Getting them aboard meant lifting deadweight with tired arms, all while the sea tried to pull everyone apart. Inside the aircraft, space was tight, and the smell of fuel and salt mixed with exhaustion and shock. Outside, more men waited, watching and hoping, and the plane could not help them all at once. That is the kind of rescue that feels both heroic and heartbreaking. Each person saved is a victory. Each person left behind for the next pickup is a reminder of limits. The swells did not stop, and the urgency did not stop either. Survivors were lashed to the wings because space ran out. The Catalina was never designed to carry dozens of rescued sailors. It had a cabin, not a ship's deck. Once the interior filled, the crew faced a brutal arithmetic. More men were in the water than the aircraft could hold, and leaving them without support felt unbearable. The solution was improvised and astonishing. Survivors were secured to the wings, using whatever lines and straps could be found, turning the plane into a floating platform with human cargo held just above the waves. It was risky. A loose tie could mean a man slipping away. A strong wave could drench them, chill them, or slam them against the structure. Yet it kept them out of constant treading water, which was already killing people. It also created an image that stays with you. An aircraft at rest on the ocean, wings wide, with exhausted faces clinging to metal like it is land. This was rescue as improvisation, with no time to perfect it. The plane became a strange hybrid, half lifeboat and half shelter, because the situation demanded it. The Catalina became unflyable, but it became a lifeboat. A seaplane needs calm conditions to take off safely. With survivors aboard and lashed outside, and with swells pushing against the hull, flight became unrealistic. The Catalina effectively surrendered its original purpose, which was to patrol and return home. In exchange, it gained a new purpose, which was to keep people alive until surface ships could arrive. That transformation is one of the most striking pivots in the story. The aircraft became stationary hope. It marked a location. It gathered survivors in a tighter area. It offered a place to rest heads and stop the constant motion of swimming. It also gave rescuers a beacon to aim for, because a plane on the ocean is far easier to find than scattered heads in the water. The crew inside became caretakers as much as aviators, managing injured men and fear while they waited. This was a different kind of heroism. It was the willingness to lose your aircraft if that is what it cost to save lives. The Catalina did not return to base in the usual way, yet it delivered something more valuable than a report. It delivered people. USS Cecil J. Doyle arrived, shining a searchlight as a beacon. When a destroyer approaches an open ocean rescue, light can be a tool and a risk. A bright beam can reveal your position to an enemy, yet it can also save lives in immediate danger. Cecil J. Doyle chose visibility. The searchlight swept across the dark water and created a column of certainty for survivors who had been drifting in a world without landmarks. That light also served another purpose. It told other rescuers, here is the center. Come here. In the water, people could orient themselves again. They could move toward the glow instead of guessing at directions that meant nothing in the dark. For the crew on the destroyer, the work ahead was grim and urgent. Lower lines. Pull men aboard. Keep watch for more bodies and more rafts. The searchlight became a promise that the waiting was ending, and it turned night from a threat into a guide. In a story full of missed messages, this was a message made of pure brightness. More ships converged, pulling men from the sea through the night. Once the location was known, Rescue became a moving operation with many hands. Ships approached carefully, because a fast turn can create wakes that push survivors away, and propellers can become hazards in water, crowded with exhausted people. Sailors leaned over rails and through lines, and they reached down for wrists that were slick with oil and salt. Each pull required coordination, because a weakened body can slip and vanish in a second. Search patterns expanded outward from the center, because survivors were scattered in groups and alone. Through the night, the scene shifted from despair to frantic action, and that shift brought its own emotions. Relief can arrive alongside grief, because not everyone you find is alive, and not everyone you save will recover. Still, the work continued, ship after ship, crew after crew, because the ocean does not pause. That convergence is one of the most powerful images in the entire saga. A lonely patch of sea that had held suffering for days, suddenly filled with human effort, engines, lights, and hands, determined to bring strangers home. Rescue crews faced sharks too, while hauling survivors aboard. Rescue did not mean the danger politely stepped aside. Sailors on deck leaned out over black water and grabbed wrists that felt boneless with exhaustion, and they did it while knowing predators were still in the area. Every splash could draw attention. A survivor thrashing near a ladder was not only hard to lift, it was a signal in the water. Crews had to work fast, yet they also had to work carefully, because a panicked pull could tear a man's grip loose and drop him back into the sea. Some rescuers used boat hooks and lines, others formed human chains, passing bodies hand to hand up to the deck. The ocean kept moving under the ship, and the ship kept moving under the rescuers, which turned each lift into a balancing act. Even after someone was aboard, the urgency continued, because there were still voices out in the dark. In that moment, courage was practical. It was the decision to reach down again. Medical teams treated burns, dehydration, and shock all at once. Once survivors crossed the rail, the crisis shifted into triage. Corpsmen and doctors faced injuries that did not arrive neatly one at a time. There were chemical burns from fuel, sunburn that had turned skin raw, and saltwater sores that looked minor until they infected. Dehydration complicated everything, because a body that has been without fresh water cannot regulate temperature or blood pressure normally. Some men were conscious but confused, answering questions with words that wandered. Others were silent, staring past faces as if they were still at sea. Medical teams had to warm some patients and cool others, because exposure can swing between chilling nights and scorching days. They also had to reintroduce fluids carefully, because too much too fast can be dangerous for a starved body. Clothing was cut away, wounds cleaned, and blankets wrapped around shoulders that could not stop shaking. The scene was crowded and relentless. Yet inside that chaos there was tenderness, because every treated injury meant a life being pulled back toward the world. Many rescued men weighed far less than when they sailed. The body changes quickly when it is forced to survive on almost nothing. Days of heat, salt, and fear strip away water and energy first, then begin consuming muscle, the very tissue needed to keep a head above the waves. Survivors arrived with faces that looked sharpened, with cheekbones suddenly prominent, and eyes that seemed too large for their sockets. Clothes hung differently, and belts that once fit felt like borrowed gear. Weight loss here was not about hunger alone. It was about constant exertion. Even when a person tries to rest, the ocean demands work, because a life jacket shifts, waves slap, and cramps threaten. The body burns fuel simply to keep breathing steady under stress. The terrifying part is how quickly the change can happen, and how deceptive it can be to outsiders. A man might look awake and alert, yet his body could be near collapse. That visible thinning became one of the clearest proofs of how long the survivors had been waiting and how close many came to not returning. The stories spread fast once secrecy no longer mattered. At first, much about the voyage had been wrapped in silence. Yet a catastrophe on that scale cannot stay contained. Once survivors were brought in and the loss became undeniable, word began to move through the Navy and then outward into families, newspapers, and communities. The speed of that spread carried its own complications. Rumor outran confirmation. Partial lists circulated. Families clung to uncertain information because uncertainty feels easier than finality. Survivors also entered a strange public space. They were living witnesses to an event many people struggled to imagine, and their accounts became the bridge between official statements and human reality. The story also collided with the end of the war, which meant it was competing with celebrations and with other headlines. That contrast made the tragedy feel even sharper for those connected to it. Public attention can honor loss, yet it can also simplify it. In the aftermath, the narrative began forming while emotions were still raw. Once a story takes shape, it becomes difficult to change, even when later evidence asks for nuance. Captain McVay survived, only to face blame from above. Survival brought him back to shore, but it did not bring him peace. In the search for accountability, the captain became a focal point because he was the highest-ranking figure who could be questioned, judged, and publicly processed. That position is uniquely isolating. A commander is responsible for his ship, yet he is also constrained by orders, intelligence, and the fog of war that hides threats until they strike. After the sinking, he faced scrutiny that moved beyond professional review and into personal judgment, and that shift changes how a person carries memory. Grief was everywhere. Families demanded answers. The Navy demanded an explanation it could present to the public. In that atmosphere, nuance often loses. What could have been treated as a complex wartime failure was compressed into a story of individual fault. The captain's survival then became part of the burden, because he lived long enough to hear anger addressed to him as if he had authored the ocean. This is one of the most unsettling twists of the saga. Even after rescue, the suffering found new forms. The court-martial focused on zigzagging, a debated evasive tactic. Zigzagging sounds simple until you picture it in real conditions. A ship changes course at intervals to complicate a submarine's firing solution. Yet those changes can interfere with speed, fuel planning, and scheduling. They can also be limited by weather and visibility, because a ship does not want to wander blindly into hazards. The decision to zigzag is therefore not a single switch. It is a judgment that shifts with circumstances. In the courtroom, that messy reality was narrowed into a question that felt clean. Did the captain zigzag enough? That framing placed an enormous tragedy onto one tactical habit, as if the war's uncertainty could be reduced to a checklist. It also made the proceedings feel like an argument about geometry while people were still mourning. The tactic itself became a symbol, which is what happens when institutions look for a controllable explanation. A debated maneuver turned into a verdict-friendly story. The result was not only a legal outcome. It was a lingering cultural wound, because it suggested that survival might have hinged on something that was never truly certain. Hashimoto testified that zigzagging might not have saved the ship. One of the strangest moments in the aftermath came from the enemy commander. Hashimoto, who had executed the attack, was brought into the process and asked to speak about what might have happened under different conditions. His perspective carried an unsettling authority because he had been the one aiming the torpedoes. He indicated that evasive maneuvers could have made little difference, which undercut the idea that a single captain's decision was the decisive factor. That testimony is fascinating because it reveals how limited control can be in combat. Submarine attacks depend on positioning, timing, and the target simply being present in the wrong place at the wrong moment. A maneuver can reduce risk, yet it cannot erase it, especially when a submarine has achieved a good approach. Hearing that from the attacker himself complicates any tidy narrative of blame. It also forces a more human conclusion. Sometimes people do many things correctly and still lose, because war is not a fair contest. It is a contest of probabilities, and probabilities still allow disaster. McVay was convicted, then lived for years under public pressure. A conviction does not end at the courthouse door. It follows a person into quiet places. It changes how strangers look at you, and it changes how you interpret your own memories. For McVay, the verdict meant he carried an official stain tied to an event already heavy with loss. Pressure came from many directions. Some people believed a captain must always be accountable, no matter the situation. Others saw him as a convenient target for a failure that had many contributors. That split created a social storm he could not steer. Public pressure also has an intimate cruelty. It can arrive in mailboxes, in conversations, and in the tone of a question asked by someone who thinks they already know the answer. Living with that kind of attention means replaying the past without relief. Even moments that should be ordinary become charged. The mind keeps returning to the same night, the same decisions, the same missing minutes, as if repetition could change the outcome. This prolonged pressure is part of the tragedy, because it extended the disaster into peacetime, turning a wartime command into a lifelong sentence of scrutiny. He died by suicide, haunted by letters from grieving families. After the war, grief did not settle neatly into history. It stayed active in people's lives, and it often searched for a place to land. Some families wrote to the captain with compassion, yet others wrote with anger sharpened by loss. A letter can feel like a small object, but it can carry enormous emotional weight. Receiving repeated blame in writing turns memory into an ambush, because it can arrive unexpectedly and be reread endlessly. Over time, that kind of correspondence can reshape how a person sees himself, even if he knows the situation was complex. The human mind is not built to absorb constant accusation without consequences. McVay's death by suicide is a stark reminder that the sinking created victims in more than one way, and in more than one decade. It also raises a difficult question about how societies process tragedy. When we want meaning, we sometimes choose a person to carry it, even when meaning does not fit into one life. This fact does not offer closure. It offers a warning about the cost of simplified blame. In late October 2000, Congress moved to clear his record. Decades after the sinking, the story did not stop evolving. Survivors, researchers, and supporters kept pressing for a fuller public accounting, and that long effort finally reached a political moment. In late October 2000, Congress passed a resolution acknowledging that the captain's conviction was unjust, and it urged that his record be cleared. That action mattered because it showed how history can be revised not by erasing facts, but by correcting interpretation. It also mattered because it was driven by persistence, not by convenience. People gathered evidence, revisited wartime records, and argued that responsibility had been misassigned. The vote did not change what happened in the Philippine Sea, and it could not bring anyone back. Still, it changed the moral framing for future generations. It shifted the story away from a single scapegoat and toward a wider understanding of wartime systems, chance, and compounded failures. There is something deeply human in that delayed correction. It suggests that justice can be slow, yet still pursued, even when the people most affected are no longer alive to see it. The Navy's own historians later revisited numbers. correcting the final count. In the aftermath of a catastrophe, numbers can feel like anchors. People hold on to them because they promise clarity. Yet early counts are often rushed, and they are shaped by confusion, incomplete lists, and the chaos of wartime record-keeping. As years passed, Navy historians and researchers returned to rosters, survivor statements, and official logs, trying to reconcile who had been aboard, who made it into the water, and who was recovered. That work is painstaking because it means comparing names that may be misspelled, duplicated, or missing. It also means facing painful questions about men who were never found and whose last moments left no witnesses. Corrections can sound cold to outsiders, yet they matter deeply to families. A single name, properly placed, can change a household's understanding of its own story. Revisiting the count was not about rewriting history. It was about tightening it, so the record could match reality as closely as possible. The confirmed death toll became 879, with 316 saved. These numbers are not statistics in the usual sense. They are the shape of absence, measured in households, friendships, and futures that never happened. 879 is the number of men who did not return, and 316 is the number who carried the memory forward. The contrast is staggering because it compresses an epic event into a single ratio, and the ratio tells you how unforgiving the sea can be. It also reminds you that survival was not evenly distributed. It depended on where you were when the torpedoes struck, on whether you reached flotation, on whether you stayed with others, and on whether your body held out long enough for chance to turn into rescue. A confirmed count also becomes a kind of boundary stone for history. It gives educators, writers, and families a shared reference point, which helps prevent the story from drifting into rumor. Behind the numbers are voices, names, and faces. The toll is the headline, yet the human detail is the truth. The sinking drove changes in tracking ships, overdue reports, and accountability. Large failures tend to leave fingerprints on the future, especially inside institutions that cannot afford repeats. The loss exposed how dangerous it is when arrivals are assumed instead of confirmed, and when overdue ships do not trigger immediate, unambiguous action. In the years that followed, procedures around movement reporting, routing awareness, and escalation were examined with a new seriousness. Tracking systems became less casual, and the expectation of follow-through grew sharper. The lesson was simple. A ship at sea is not safe until someone verifies it is safe. Accountability also widened. The tragedy showed that disaster can come from layers of small breakdowns rather than one dramatic error. That idea pushed the Navy towards systems that rely less on assumption and more on confirmation, especially when communications are limited by operational bow. Security. These changes are not as cinematic as a rescue at night, yet they are one of the most meaningful legacies. They represent lives lost teaching an organization how to notice danger faster and how to respond before the ocean takes time away. Survivors formed reunions, carrying memory like a quiet duty. After the war, the men who lived through the ordeal had to return to ordinary life with an extraordinary experience inside them. For many, reunions became a way to speak in a language only fellow survivors truly understood. These gatherings were not only about nostalgia. They were acts of remembrance, and they served as informal history workshops where details could be compared and preserved. A reunion might include shared meals, photographs, and a roll call of names that carried weight in every pause. Some survivors brought family members so the next generation could meet the people behind the stories. Others came because they needed to see proof that anyone else had been there and had made it out. Over time, reunions also became a race against age, and each year's attendance carried a quiet awareness of who was missing. In a world that moves on quickly, these meetings slowed time down. They kept the narrative human, not abstract. They also created a community that could advocate for recognition, accuracy, and fairness long after the headlines faded. Memorials now name the fallen, so the sea does not. The ocean keeps no headstones, and that absence can make grief feel ungrounded. Memorials exist to give the lost a place in the world again, a place where a name can be spoken without drifting away. For this tragedy, memorials and plaques carry lists that turn scale into individual identity. A carved name does something powerful. It tells you that the person was real, and that the community has chosen to remember deliberately rather than vaguely. These sites also create a space for ritual. Flowers can be placed. Silence can be shared. Anniversaries can be marked with intention. Memorials teach too. A visitor who knows only a fragment of the story can stand before a wall of names and understand, instantly, that this was not a single dramatic moment. It was hundreds of lives ending in a chain of events. By naming the fallen, memorials resist the ocean's tendency to erase details. They also offer something survivors and families often need most: a place to bring their thoughts and to let them land. Families sought closure for decades without a grave to visit. When a death has a burial place, grief as a destination. Without one, mourning can feel like carrying a question that never stops echoing. Many families of the lost had no remains to hold, no cemetery to stand beside, and no single date when certainty arrived cleanly. Some received official notifications that were painfully brief, and then lived with the imagination of the open sea filling in details. Over decades, that absence can shape family stories. Children grow up hearing a name connected to an ocean, and the ocean stays part of the household's emotional landscape. Closure also becomes complicated by public debate about the sinking, because controversy can keep wounds open. For some families, learning new information later brought relief. For others, it brought renewed pain. This long search for closure is part of why the story still resonates. It is not only about what happened in a few days of wartime. It is about how those days continued to shape lives for generations, through uncertainty and longing for something as simple as a place to stand and say goodbye. In August 2017, the wreck was discovered in the Philippine Sea. For years, the ship existed in two places at once. It lived in memory and paperwork, and it also lay somewhere on the seafloor, unreachable and unseen. Finding it required modern ocean technology and careful historical reconstruction, because the sea does not hand back coordinates easily. The discovery in August 2017 changed the story's physical reality. It turned an abstract loss into a located site, and it gave historians a chance to compare damage with accounts from survivors and records from the attacker. It also carried a solemn feeling, because this was not a treasure hunt. It was the identification of a war grave. For families, the news could land in different ways. Some felt relief that the ocean's silence had finally been answered. Others felt the ache of distance, because deep water is not a place you can visit in any ordinary sense. Still, discovery matters. It confirms. It grounds. It tells the world that the ship did not vanish into myth. It sank to a real resting place, and it remained there, waiting, for more than 7 decades. The depth preserved details, including readable markings on the sea floor. Deep water behaves differently from shallow water. Light does not reach. Temperatures stay cold. Many of the organisms that rapidly break down wrecks near coasts are less active or absent in the abyss. That environment can slow decay, which means a wreck can retain features that seem impossible after so many decades. When remotely operated vehicles reached the site, they could see recognizable shapes and surfaces, and in some cases, they could make out markings that confirmed Emcraft identity. That preservation is eerie because it feels like time has been folded. Steel that once rang with footsteps now rests in silence, yet it can still display clues of its origin. For historians, those details matter because they support careful identification and allow analysis without disturbing the site. For the public, readable markings create an emotional jolt. They make the wreck feel less like a generic ship shape and more like the specific vessel tied to this story. The seafloor becomes a kind of museum without air, where artifacts remain in place. Preservation does not erase tragedy, yet it makes the past feel closer and more undeniable. The bow lies separated from the hull, showing the violence of impact. Wrecks can teach through their geometry. When major sections are separated, it suggests forces that were not merely destructive but structural, breaking the ship's strength like snapping a spine. A detached bow tells you that the initial damage and flooding were not confined to one neat area. It indicates tearing, rapid stress, and a chain reaction that overwhelmed the ship's ability to remain one piece. For investigators, separation patterns can support conclusions about where explosions occurred and how the ship moved during its final minutes. For listeners, it offers a stark visual truth. The ship did not simply slip beneath the surface intact. It was wounded so severely that parts of it began to travel different paths, even before it reached the bottom. That image helps explain why survivors described the sinking as shockingly fast and why so few life-saving measures could be carried out fully. A separated bow is also a symbol. It shows how sudden violence can divide what once seemed solid and how a single night can break an entire world into fragments. On the seafloor, that separation remains visible, like a frozen moment of catastrophe. The ship now rests as a war grave, watched by silence and time. A war grave is more than a wreck site. It is a place where loss is still present, even if no living person can stand there. In deep ocean, the ship's resting place is protected by distance and pressure, and it demands respect because it holds the story of men who never returned. That status shapes how people talk about exploration. The goal is not removal or souvenir hunting. The goal is documentation and remembrance with minimal disturbance. The idea of the ship resting also carries a strange comfort because it offers a final location in a story defined by drifting. The men who died are not scattered across the surface anymore. Their ship has a fixed place in the world, even if it is far below it. Time continues to move, yet the seafloor keeps its own pace, slow and patient. In that quiet environment, the ship's outline endures, and the story remains anchored. It invites us to remember not only the horror, but the scale of service, and the human lives inside steel that went to war. The tragedy echoed into pop culture, including a famous film monologue. Many people first encountered this story not in a history book, but in a few minutes of cinema. In the film Jaws, the character Quint delivers a chilling account of sailors in the water, and he names the ship as the source of his nightmares. The speech is not a documentary record, yet it carried the event into living rooms and into the shared imagination of audiences who had never opened a naval bar. Archive. That kind of cultural echo is powerful because it shapes what people remember and how they feel it. It also creates a strange tension for survivors and families who can find their deepest loss turned into a scene, a shorthand for fear. At the same time, attention can reopen the door to learning. Pop culture can act like a flare in the night, pointing curious minds toward the real history, the real names, and the real human cost behind the lines. Her big guns hurled 8-inch shells, miles beyond the horizon. Naval gunnery can feel like science fiction when you picture it clearly. The target might be a ridge you cannot even see, hidden by the curve of the earth and the haze of heat. Yet the ship can still reach it, using careful calculations and coordinated spotting. The guns themselves were massive machines, with loading systems, rotating turrets, and teams moving in practiced rhythms. Each shot began deep in the ship, where shells and powder were handled with caution that bordered on superstition. Then came the moment of firing, when the whole cruiser shuddered and the air snapped. The shell climbed high, vanished, and returned to the world as an impact far away. When the system worked, it could clear defenses, silence artillery, and protect troops before they ever touched a beach. It was not mindless bombardment. It was deliberate, measured force, delivered by a crew who had to trust mathematics and discipline more than eyesight. She carried seaplanes on catapults for scouting and spotting fire. Before drones and satellites, a cruiser could launch its own eyes. A small seaplane would be rolled onto a catapult, checked by mechanics, and then hurled into flight with a sudden burst of power. The pilot climbed above the sea and looked for things the ship could not see. Enemy ships, hidden reefs, smoke on the horizon, or a shoreline battery that needed to be located before it could be silenced. When the cruiser fired, the plane could also act as a guide, calling corrections so the shells walked closer to the target. The relationship was intimate and risky. The plane depended on the ship for recovery, because it had to land on the water and be hoisted back aboard. That meant rough seas could turn a routine return into a nightmare. Still, this system expanded the ship's reach. It turned a warship into a small aviation base, and it let the crew feel as if they had a lookout tower in the sky, riding above the battle. She steamed at over 30 knots when the throttles opened. Speed at sea is not just about arriving early. It is about survival, positioning, and surprise. A fast cruiser could dash ahead to screen a carrier group, swing wide to investigate a contact, or retreat from danger before it closed in. He could also keep up with the fleet's most valuable assets, which were often moving at high pace to launch and recover aircraft. Inside the engineering spaces, that speed came from heat, noise, and constant attention. Boilers had to be fed, pressures watched, and machinery kept within limits, even when the ship demanded everything at once. For sailors below decks, a high-speed run could be felt as a steady vibration that never let you forget the power moving through the hull. On the surface, the wake lengthened, and the sea flattened into white streaks. In the Pacific, where distances swallow time, 30 knots felt like bending the map. It let commanders think bigger, because the ship could be somewhere else sooner than the enemy expected. Her armor was real, but submarines could still find seams. Warships are built with hard lessons in mind. Armor protects key areas, yet no ship can be wrapped in steel everywhere without becoming slow and unstable. Designers make choices. They protect magazines, machinery, and command spaces as best they can, then accept that other parts will remain vulnerable. This is where the idea of seams comes in. A torpedo does not need to punch through the thickest plate. It only needs to break the ship's ability to stay watertight and functional. The blast can twist frames, rupture fuel lines, and flood compartments that shift the ship's balance. Even a strong hull can be undone by where the damage happens and how quickly it spreads. That is why crews drilled in closing watertight doors and shoring bulkheads, because survival depended on minutes and muscle. Armor gave confidence, yet it also created a dangerous illusion. A protected ship can still be a fragile system, and the sea is excellent at finding the weak point you did not imagine. Her crew lived in tight steel spaces, for months at a time. Life aboard a cruiser was a lesson in sharing space, sound, and routine. Sailors slept in stacked bunks, often near pipes that ticked with heat changes and fans that never truly stopped. Privacy was rare. The ship smelled of oil, paint, metal, and food that had to feed many mouths from a single kitchen. Work rhythms shaped the day more than sunrise did, because watches rotated and the ship never shut down. One group maintained engines, another cleaned guns, another chipped rust and repainted, because the sea constantly tries to reclaim steel. Mail became treasure, and small comforts became rituals. A cup of coffee, a song, a lucky charm tucked into a locker. When action threatened, that crowded world tightened further. Men moved quickly through narrow passageways, shoulders brushing, voices overlapping, everyone trusting that the person beside them knew his job. In those conditions, a crew becomes more than co-workers. It becomes a living system, built from habit, humor, and mutual reliance, and it can hold together longer than anyone expects. She was a Portland-class heavy cruiser, built for speed and endurance. Her design sits in a fascinating in-between era, when navies still believed in big gun duels, yet aircraft were already rewriting the rules. The class was meant to be a hard-hitting generalist. It could protect carriers, batter shore targets, and still sprint with the fleet. That balance shaped everything from fuel capacity to hull form, because a cruiser that runs out of range becomes useless in the Pacific's distances. Inside, the ship was a maze of compartments, magazines, and machinery spaces, arranged to keep fighting even when something went wrong. Heavy cruisers also carried prestige, because they could show presence without the political weight of a battleship. In practice, this meant she could be sent almost anywhere, from icy northern waters to tropical seas, and still be expected to arrive ready for action. A single hull became a flexible tool for an entire ocean war. She was launched in the early 1930s, before the Pacific War. It is strange to imagine this ship entering the water in a world where global conflict still felt like a distant rumor. Her early years were about drills, inspections, and peacetime rhythms, with sailors learning their stations before anyone could predict the storms ahead. Technology was also changing quickly. Radios improved. Fire control became more precise. Naval aviation grew from experiment to necessity. A ship launched in that decade had to adapt or become obsolete while still young. That meant constant upgrades, new equipment, and revised tactics, layered onto a hull that was built for an earlier set of assumptions. For the crew, the ship became a moving hometown that trained them for a war they could not yet see. When the world shifted, this pre-war vessel did not retire into history. It stepped forward, already seasoned by years at sea, and it began doing the work it was never officially built to do, which was to survive a total war. She served as a fleet flagship through many of the hardest campaigns. A flagship is not just a proud title. It is a floating brain, where plans are argued, revised, and sent outward as orders. That role changes a ship's atmosphere. It brings extra staff, extra radios, and an added pressure that rides alongside the guns. In a combat zone, a flagship becomes a magnet for attention. If the enemy can disrupt command, they can disrupt the whole operation. So the crew carries a double responsibility. They must fight as a warship, while also protecting the people who direct the fight. This is where charts, codes, and careful timing become as important as shells. Imagine a cramped room lit by red lamps, with officers tracking moving dots across a map while the ship shakes from her own fire. From that kind of space, whole island assaults can be coordinated, and mistakes can ripple outward across hundreds of miles of ocean. Admiral Spruant used her as a command ship across the Central Pacific. When an admiral chooses a ship, he is choosing a workplace for decisions that can shift history. Under Spruance, this cruiser became a place where patience could be as valuable as aggression. Carrier warfare demanded calm timing. It required knowing when to hold aircraft back, when to strike, and when to protect the fleet's lifeblood, which was the flight deck. The command ship also had to absorb information fast because reports arrived in fragments. Pilots described what they saw through cracked microphones. Scouts sent bearings and guesses. Radar offered a new kind of vision, yet it could still confuse. The challenge was to turn uncertainty into action without letting nerves take over. That made the ship feel like a traveling headquarters, always listening and always calculating. While dullers worked topside and engines drove the hull forward, the war was also being fought in quiet rooms below, where choices were made under pressure and then Quasta, launched outward as signals into the sky. She earned 10 battle stars across an island-hopping war. A battle star is a small symbol that stands for something enormous. It means the ship was present, active, and exposed to danger during a major operation. 10 of them tells you she was not a background vessel. She kept returning to the forward edge, campaign after campaign, as the front line moved across the Pacific like a long tide. Each operation had its own hazards. Sometimes the threat was aircraft. Sometimes it was submarines. Sometimes it was coastal guns hidden in jungle and rock. A cruiser could spend hours firing at shore targets, then spend the night racing to a new station, because the fleet never stopped moving. For the crew, these stars were not medals in a drawer. They were memories of alarms, smoke, and tension, stitched together into a long stretch of service. A ship that collects so many does not simply participate in war. It endures it repeatedly until endurance becomes identity. Before the war, she hosted President Roosevelt on official trips. For a moment, this warship became a floating stage for American leadership, long before anyone knew how brutal the Pacific would become. Franklin D. Roosevelt came aboard during a period when public appearances carried strategic weight and a Navy vessel could project stability as much as chaos. Strength. The decks that would later shake under battle stations were polished for ceremony, with sailors standing tall in uniforms meant to impress. Imagine the contrast. A heavy cruiser built for combat becomes, for a brief time, a moving White House corridor, with security details, formal greetings, and carefully planned routes. Those trips were also a kind of rehearsal for the nation's coming responsibilities overseas. The ship's crew saw how closely politics and naval power could intertwine, even in peacetime. Years later, that memory would feel almost unreal, like a postcard from a calmer world that vanished faster than anyone expected. She showed the flag on goodwill cruises when peace still felt possible. In the 1930s, American warships often traveled to be seen, not to shoot. A goodwill cruise could mean visiting foreign ports, hosting receptions, and reminding other nations that the United States could reach far beyond its coastline. The ship's arrival would turn a harbor into an event. Small boats gathered. Bands played. Locals came to stare at turrets, rigging, and the disciplined line of sailors along the rail. For the crew, these visits were part diplomacy and part education. They learned how strangers reacted to American power and how a smile could matter alongside a gun. These cruises also carried a hidden message to potential rivals. A modern cruiser in your harbor is a sentence written in steel, saying, "We can be here again if we must." Looking back, the sadness is how quickly the world moved from handshakes to air raids. She trained with the fleet in an era of treaty limits. Naval treaties tried to put ceilings on tonnage and weapons, yet they could not limit imagination. Designers squeezed performance from every allowed inch, and sailors drilled to make those designs real. Training meant long days of gunnery practice, damage control exercises, and navigation under strict rules, because a single mistake could wreck a ship without any enemy nearby. The fleet practiced as if war could begin tomorrow, while politicians still spoke of restraint and balance. That tension shaped the culture aboard. Crews learned precision, because a treaty-era navy had to prove it was worth its cost. They also learned improvisation, because budgets and limits never match real needs. When the world finally snapped into war, this ship did not begin from zero. It carried years of rehearsed teamwork, stored like muscle memory, ready to be spent at terrible speed. Her name honored an American city, far from any ocean. Naming a warship after Indianapolis is a reminder that naval war reaches deep inland. The city sits among rivers and rail lines, not surf and harbors, yet it lent its name to a vessel that would cross the widest ocean on Earth. That connection mattered during the war because home front support was not abstract. Communities followed ships through newspapers, letters, and rumors, and a familiar name made distant danger feel personal. It also created a strange kind of guardianship. A ship's crew carried the reputation of a place most of them had never seen, and the city carried the ship's fate like a second heartbeat. When tragedy struck, the name made grief easier to locate because it was attached to a map pin, a hometown, and a sense of identity. In that way, the ship became a bridge between farmland and frontline, tying ordinary American life to the cold arithmetic of sea war. In wartime, she helped soften beaches before landings began. Amphibious assaults looked heroic in headlines, yet they depended on grim preparation. Before troops ran toward sand, naval guns tried to break what waited behind it. The ship would take station offshore, often before dawn, with crews watching a coastline that seemed peaceful until the first flashes answered back. Targets were not always obvious. Bunkers hid in rock. Gun pits were camouflaged. Observers searched for telltale smoke, then fed corrections back to the ship. Each volley was a blend of violence and calculation, meant to cut wire, collapse positions, and force defenders to keep their heads down at the worst possible time. The work demanded stamina. Hours of firing heated barrels shook the hull and filled the air with a metallic taste. It also demanded restraint, because friendly forces were moving into the same space. This kind of support rarely makes a single dramatic scene, yet it can decide whether a landing becomes a foothold or a massacre. She fought in the Aleutians, in cold seas and harsh fog. The Aleutian campaign is often called the Forgotten Front, yet it was a place where nature fought alongside the enemy. In that northern chain, fog could swallow a ship's sense of direction, and cold could punish hands that needed to work quickly. Lookouts stared into grey, trying to separate a rock from a threat, while swells slapped the hull with heavy, indifferent rhythm. The danger was not only combat, it was grounding, collision, and the slow creep of fatigue when every surface felt damp. Supply lines were thin, and weather could shut down operations without warning. A cruiser operating there had to be ready for sudden contact, yet also ready for days of frustration when visibility collapsed to nothing. It was a proving ground for discipline. Crews learned that warfare is not always tropical islands and bright skies. Sometimes it is endurance in a cold blur, where the ocean and the air are the same color, and every decision feels like a guess. She supported the Gilbert Islands push when the offensive gained momentum. The Gilberts marked a turning point because they forced the Allies to prove they could take fortified islands head-on. These were not empty specks. They were defended places, built to bleed an attacker and to buy time for Japan's wider strategy. The ship's role was to help crack that defensive shell. She screened more vulnerable vessels, provided gunfire support, and helped shape the sea space around the landing zones so troops had a chance to get ashore. The intensity of such operations can be hard to picture. Radios chatter non-stop. Smoke drifts across the water. Small craft dart in and out like insects in a storm. A cruiser must stay steady through all of it, because panic makes gunnery sloppy and maneuvers dangerous. Campaigns like this also had a psychological edge. Success signaled that the long road across the Pacific was possible. Each gained island was not just territory. It was a stepping stone with blood on it, leading toward Japan. She served in the Marshall Islands Drive, island by island. After the Gilberts, the Marshalls became the next locked door in the Central Pacific. Taking them was not simply a matter of arriving and fighting. It required coordination across carriers, transports, submarines, and surface ships, all moving on tight schedules in hostile waters. For a cruiser, the days could blur into a rhythm of stations and missions, shifting from bombardment to screening to radar watch, depending on the hour's needs. The phrase "island by island" sounds orderly, yet it was more like solving a chain of puzzles under fire. Each atoll had different reefs, different channels, and different defensive layouts. Mistakes could strand landing craft or expose ships to shore batteries. A successful drive also depended on logistics, because every captured place needed fuel, ammunition, and airfields to keep the offensive rolling. In that sense, the ship was part fighter and part delivery system, helping move an entire war machine forward across an ocean that wanted to keep everything far apart. She moved through the Marianas Campaign as airfields changed the war. The Marianas mattered because they were close enough to put Japan within reach of sustained bombing. That strategic shift made these islands more than targets. They became future launch pads, and that raised the stakes for everyone involved. A cruiser operating in the campaign was working inside a massive, moving argument about the future of the war. Take the islands, and the sky changes. Fail, and the war stretches on. The ship's tasks could include protecting carriers that delivered air power, supporting landings that seized terrain, and guarding the fleet from counterattack. The atmosphere was one of constant pressure because both sides understood the meaning of runways on these islands. Even small details gained weight. A radar contact could be the start of a major strike. A night maneuver could set up a daylight battle. Through it all, sailors lived with the awareness that they were not only fighting for today's operation, they were fighting to reshape the map of what was possible tomorrow. She operated near Saipan, when naval gunfire shaped the shoreline. Saipan was a place where the ocean and land fought for control of a narrow edge, and warships were asked to carve that edge into something survivable. The ship would work close enough to send shells into ridges and caves, yet far enough to avoid becoming an easy target. That balancing act never felt comfortable. Coastal batteries could fire back, and observation posts could hide until they chose to reveal themselves. Naval gunfire here was about shaping terrain. It could collapse entrances, strip trees that concealed positions, and break lines of movement so defenders could not regroup. It also demanded communication with forces ashore because the battlefield shifted by the minute. A map mark that was safe at sunrise might be deadly by noon. This kind of support is often described with dry phrases, yet to the people receiving it, it could feel like the sky itself had weight and direction. When the coordination worked, it saved lives in ways no photograph could fully capture. She helped cover the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Carrier warfare can feel distant until you remember what a surface ship was doing underneath it all. While pilots fought high above, this cruiser helped form the protective ring that kept the carriers alive long enough to launch again and again. Radar screens glowed in tense compartments, plotting faint blips that could become a mass attack. Gun crews waited for the moment when distant dots turned into diving aircraft, and when the sky suddenly demanded everything at once. The battle earned its nickname because so many attacking planes were destroyed, yet that result depended on a whole system working together. Fighters needed direction. Anti-aircraft batteries needed time to engage. Ships needed discipline so they did not collide while maneuvering at speed. In that swirling web of danger, her job was to stay steady, stay alert, and keep the heart of the fleet beating. She fired on enemy positions, guided by spotters and radios. Imagine trying to hit a hidden gun position that you cannot clearly see from the deck. The solution was teamwork, stretched across air and sea. Spotters in aircraft or on shore watched the fall of shells, then spoke corrections over radio in clipped phrases. Left, right, short, over. Each adjustment turned thunder into accuracy. This was not random destruction. It was a kind of long-distance conversation, with the ship answering what the observer saw. The crew had to trust voices they could not see, while the turrets rotated with immense weight and precision. Timing mattered too. Friendly groups moved. Smoke drifted. A target might disappear under dust, then reappear for seconds before hiding again. In those moments, calm communication was as valuable as the guns themselves. When it worked, it could silence a battery that threatened landing craft, or break a defensive line that had stalled an advance. A warship became a listening instrument, then a hammer. She screened carriers and convoys, guarding high-value targets. The most important ships in a task force were not always the ones with the biggest guns. Carriers carried the aircraft. Transports carried the soldiers, fuel, and supplies that made campaigns possible. Protecting them meant living on the edge of constant suspicion. Every radar contact was a question. Every distant wake could be a threat. Screening ships took stations like a moving fence, shifting positions to cover likely approaches and watching for submarines that might be waiting along predictable crack. Routes. It was demanding work because it rarely offered a clear moment of triumph. Most of the time, the victory was that nothing happened. The convoy kept moving. The carrier kept launching planes. The war machine kept breathing. Yet that quiet success required relentless attention, training, and the willingness to react instantly. When danger did appear, the screen was expected to take the first punch, so the ships behind it could keep the war moving forward. She survived air attacks, when the sky turned into a battlefield. An air attack could begin with a shout, then a rising wail as alarms cut through the ship. Men ran to stations they knew by heart, even when fear tightened their throats. The threat came fast. A plane could appear as a speck, then become a roaring shape diving toward the waterline. Anti-aircraft gunners tracked targets that were weaving, dropping, and accelerating, while the ship itself maneuvered to make a harder aim. The air filled with tracers, smoke, and the sharp crack of rapid-fire guns. It was chaos that demanded precision. A single lapse could mean a bomb through a deck, or a kamikaze strike that turned speed and courage into instant catastrophe. Surviving did not mean escaping untouched. It meant keeping fires from spreading, keeping flooding under control, and keeping the ship capable of fighting again the next day. Every attack left the crew with a deeper respect for how thin the line was between routine and ruin. She carried urgent orders in a war where minutes mattered. In the Pacific, information was a weapon. An order delivered late could send a convoy into danger or leave aircraft searching the wrong ocean. Warships often carried dispatches because radio could be intercepted or jammed, and because some plans were too sensitive to trust to the airwaves. Picture a sealed packet passed from hand to hand, guarded like a living secret. The ship's speed turned into strategy as she raced between islands and fleet anchors, bringing instructions that could reshape an operation. The crew might never know what was inside those messages, yet they could feel the urgency in the officers' faces and in the sudden change of course. These runs were not glamorous. They were tense, because a fast ship still had to cross waters where submarines hunted. The pressure also came from the calendar, weather windows, fuel limits, timing for airstrikes. When a message arrived on time, it could save ships and lives without ever firing a shot. In war, silence and speed can be as decisive as gunfire. Her crew practiced damage control because steel ships bleed fast. A warship is a machine, yet it is also a fragile system of pipes, cables, and compartments that can unravel in minutes. That is why damage control was treated as a second kind of combat. Sailors drilled on sealing doors, setting shoring timbers, and fighting fires with foam, water, and sheer persistence. They learned how smoke behaves in passageways and how heat can travel through bulkheads until a safe space becomes an oven. They also learned hard choices. Flood one compartment to save another. Cut power to stop an electrical fire, even if it darkens vital spaces. In battle, these skills were not theoretical. A bomb hit or near miss could blow holes, rupture fuel lines, and leave men working in darkness with hoses and flashlights. The goal was simple: keep the ship afloat, keep her moving, keep her able to fight. The remarkable part is how often ordinary sailors achieved that, with training, grit, and teamwork under terrifying pressure. Fire mains, pumps, and bulkheads were the difference between life and loss. When a ship is damaged, the battle becomes a race between water and organization. Fire mains carry the water that feeds hoses. Pumps clear flooded spaces. Bulkheads divide the ship into sections so one disaster does not become a ship-wide death sentence. These features sound like dull engineering until you imagine them failing. Without pressure in the fire main, flames spread unchecked through paint, wiring, and stored gear. Without pumps, rising water steals stability, then steals power, then steals escape routes. Bulkheads are the last argument a ship makes against the sea, and their doors must be closed in time, even if that choice traps people on the wrong side. The crew had to understand this system like a second language. They memorized valve locations and repair kits, and they practiced moving through smoke and noise. In war, the men who knew how to keep water and fire contained could save a ship that looked doomed. Their work was invisible to the enemy. It had decided whether the ship lived past the next hour. A single torpedo could ruin a ship's balance in moments. A torpedo attack is not only a hole in a hull. It is a sudden shift in physics. Water floods one side, the ship lists, and every corridor becomes tilted. Heavy equipment slides. Ammunition becomes harder to move. Doors jam under pressure. Even walking turns dangerous as decks angle and pipes sweat salt water. The ship's stability depends on careful distribution of weight, and a torpedo ignores that design with brutal simplicity. Damage control teams might counterflood to correct the list, which means intentionally adding water to another space, all while alarms ring and the sea keeps pushing in. Meanwhile, engines may lose power if seawater reaches the wrong compartments, and steering can fail if shock damages systems deep inside. The terrifying truth is that it can happen so fast that there is no time for a heroic turnaround. A ship that felt solid and unstoppable can become a sinking, tilting labyrinth in minutes. That is why crews feared submarines. They were unseen, and their weapons attacked the very idea of balance. As we come to the end of our voyage tonight, let your mind look back over the wake we have traced together. We followed a ship that carried the weight of history across an enormous ocean, moving with purpose and secrecy, then vanishing into a night that should have been ordinary. We lingered with the sudden violence of the torpedoes, with steel giving way to water, and with the strange new world that forms when a ship is gone and only the sea remains. We drifted through days where the horizon offered no answers, where bodies grew weaker under sun and salt, and where fear arrived on quiet fins in the dark. We listened for the moment when chance finally shifted, when an aircraft saw what it was never meant to see, and rescue began to gather the scattered pieces of survival. We also carried the story forward into the years after, where memory, blame, and persistence shaped what the world chose to believe, and what it eventually chose to correct. Now, you do not need to hold any of it tightly. Let the details soften at the edges, like lights along a shoreline seen from far out at sea. If you are still awake and you would like another story to sail into, there will be a next video waiting on your screen. You can follow it when you are ready, and if not, it will still be there another night. And if this episode kept you company, you might like, subscribe, or leave a small thought below. It helps this channel find others who need a calm place to listen. For now, let your breathing slow. Let your jaw unclench. Let your shoulders drop. You are safe, you are here, and the ocean can fade back into a distant whisper. Sleep well, and good night.